name's Emma Ledford, and I am the Senior Communications and Digital Media Coordinator for Texas Freedom Network. Progress Texas is an amazing partner because y'all are like us. You're trying to advance, go figure, progress in Texas. Can I cuss? Everything about this state is trying to erase our rights, and the fact that we are here fighting back and bringing people together. We know progressives exist in Texas. We know there's a huge population of progressives in Texas, and we need to just come together, kick ass, and fight for actual equality and justice. We love you guys, and you're kicking ass.
It's Monday, May 19th, 2025, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. At the top today, you've heard the news regarding President Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis. Carolyn Wilburn and Michael Garcia at the Houston Chronicle write that the revelation that the president is fighting an aggressive form of prostate cancer drives home at a moment where nothing appears sacred when it comes to federal budget cuts, that funding the fight against cancer should remain a top priority for our nation. The Chronicle talked to Dr. Bilal Al-Siddiqui at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, who says Biden, quote, has been a major supporter of cancer research, and it just continues to show how important this type of support really is. It really drives home the importance of ongoing research into prevention and treatment of prostate cancer, unquote. Messages of support from all over Texas politics. U.S. Congressman Al Green of Houston says, quote, I am saddened by it all. I just want to let him know that he has friends and he should count me among them, unquote, noting President Biden's longstanding work with the black community, having served as VP to the first black president in Barack Obama and having picked the first black and female vice president in Kamala Harris. Dallas Congressman Jasmine Crockett tweets, quote, my heart is with President Biden and his family, lifting him up in prayer and wishing him a peaceful, successful healing journey, unquote. San Antonio Congressman Joaquin Castro says, quote, President Biden is a fighter, and this moment is no different. I know he will tackle this challenge with the same tenacity and grace he has shown throughout his career and his life. We stand with you, Mr. President, unquote. Progress Texas similarly sends our support, gratitude, and best wishes to President Biden. Executive Director Kathleen Thompson writes, quote, the entire Progress Texas team wishes recovery and rest for President Joe Biden. We know he will have access to the best doctors. We will continue to work every day for access to affordable, high-quality health care for all Texans at a time when Republicans are working to cut life-saving Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, unquote. To the Texas state capitol, where the closing days of a legislative session are typically marked with a mad rush to get as much legislation passed as possible, and in many cases, there appears to be hope that that mad rush will conceal legislation that really has no business passing. We'd put House Bill 49 firmly in that bucket. The brainchild of San Angelo Republican Representative Drew Darby, a lawyer by trade whose firm back home focuses in part on legal matters regarding the energy sector. HB 49 is designed to shield oil and gas companies from legal jeopardy down the line should it turn out to be a bad idea to use treated wastewater from oil extraction, produced water, as we've talked about, full of chemicals, some of which are proprietary and poorly understood from a health risk perspective, to shore up dwindling water supplies in ever drier and drier Texas. More specifically, oil and gas companies want to be able to sell this disgusting wastewater byproduct, but don't want to be on the hook when it hurts Texas land, rivers, property, livestock, and people. Nicole Saunders, senior attorney at the Environmental Defense Fund, says she does not trust proposed produced water use permits to account for every chemical and toxic contaminant that could remain after treatment. She's not convinced that current testing and treatment are sufficient to eliminate all of the risk. We had extensive conversations about produced water last year with two experts, Bill Birch, who was running for the Texas Railroad Commission at the time, and Alex Ortiz with the Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club. We invite you to give that another listen, after which the idea of dumping this stuff in rivers or spraying it on food crops is likely to give you the willies. See the link in the show notes. Back to the ledge, we do have a significant clarification to offer on one item from Friday's Daily Dispatch, in which we relate a Texas Tribune report that HB 32, a bill portrayed as targeting real estate squatters, but in reality seeking to make evictions a lot easier to do for Texas landlords, had died with the passing of Friday's House deadline, which is true. However, the identical Senate Bill 38, companion to HB 32, is still very much in play. We've also learned from Mark Melton with the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center, who have been fighting this legislation hard all session, that Republican State Rep Angie Chen Button, the author of the bill, is rumored to be considering going back on promises she made to amend it in a way that would protect everyday renters who are not squatters from its worst effects. If you're a renter in Northeast Dallas County, perhaps a call to your representative in the Texas House today to remind her to keep her promises and protect Texas renters. And if you're a renter in El Paso, perhaps a call to your state senator, Cesar Blanco, to ask him why he thinks it's a good idea to give your landlord extra leverage in kicking you out of your home. Senator Blanco is a co-author of SB 38 and the only Democrat involved. Wrapping the ledge for this Monday, a rundown from the Dallas Morning News on the major items flying around this week as Sine Die approaches in 2 weeks from today. On June 2nd, Gomer Jeffers Jr. points to education funding, already short of what was needed and even more hamstrung with Senate meddling, bail reform that places restrictions on Texas judges and has been highlighted by both Governor Greg Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick as an item they'll resort to special sessions to get done. The future of the Texas Lottery and its governing commission, which is under its 12-year systematic evaluation and set to dissolve at the end of August if not reauthorized. And Dan Patrick's pet project, the total ban on the consumable hemp market in Texas. Dan Patrick wants no fun of any kind. Look for a crazy next couple of weeks at the Capitol, and we'll be on top of it. Outside of the Pink Dome, a flurry of developments over the weekend. Back to El Paso, where Donald Trump's deportation push is now verging on an international human rights scandal. Cindy Ramirez at El Paso Matters writes on a new Amnesty International report titled Dehumanized by Design: Human Rights Violations in El Paso, which exposes serious human rights violations at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's El Paso Service Processing Center. Based on a visit last month and interviews conducted with detained migrants and local service providers, the report highlights systemic mistreatment, arbitrary detention, lack of due process, and inadequate access to legal resources. Detention conditions were found to be substandard and inhumane, failing to meet not only the UN's Nelson Mandela rules, but ICE's own internal guidelines. The findings are part of the Nobel Peace Prize-winning Amnesty International's broader examination of ICE detention policies, especially in light of the Trump administration's aggressive immigration measures, including mass deportation orders and the reckless and questionable use of the 18th Century Alien Enemies Act. See a link to the report and the article listed in the show notes from El Paso Matters. We haven't heard much from conservative crusading federal judge Matthew Kacsmaryk's Amarillo courtroom lately, but that changed over the weekend. Aaron Reed at Truth Out says last week Kacsmaryk issued a controversial ruling declaring that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act no longer protects LGBTQ plus individuals from workplace discrimination beyond wrongful termination. In other words, harassment and abuse over sexual orientation in the workplace, as long as it doesn't involve the targeted person being fired, is not prohibited. Kacsmaryk's decision contradicts the Supreme Court's 2020 Bostock versus Clayton County ruling, which held that discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity is inherently sex-based and thus illegal. The case brought to Kacsmaryk by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's office in tandem with the Hard Right Heritage Foundation challenged Equal Employment Opportunity Commission guidance affirming LGBTQ plus protections. Kacsmaryk upheld policies enforcing gendered dress codes and restroom use based on assigned sex at birth, arguing such rules apply equally to all employees, a logic critics liken to outdated justifications for bans on same-sex marriage. Kacsmaryk's ruling orders the removal of all language in EEOC guidance that defines sex to include sexual orientation and gender identity, marking a significant rollback of LGBTQ plus rights and setting up a potential legal showdown with the Supreme Court's prior precedent. Speaking of Ken Paxton, he's on the other end of two lawsuits from 5 Texas district attorneys over new rules that would allow the AG essentially unfettered access to their records. Aiden Runnels at the Texas Tribune writes that both lawsuits were filed in Travis County and argue these new rules, which specifically target Texas counties with over 400,000 residents, of which there are only 13, is an unconstitutional overreach that imposes costly, burdensome data requests. The new rules allow Paxton's staff to demand nearly all case documents, regardless of prosecution status, and are framed as a way for Paxton's office to control so-called rogue prosecutors. DAs from Travis, El Paso, Harris, Dallas, and Bexar counties allege these rules exceed legal authority, serve political aims, and violate both state and federal law. We head north of the Red River for a truly troubling bit here that foreshadows what's to come here in Texas under even more blatant control over education by members of the Donald Trump cult. Maya Yang at The Guardian says Oklahoma's new social studies standards, driven by Republican State Superintendent Ryan Walters, an avid and vocal Trump bootlicker, include controversial language directing high school students to examine so-called discrepancies in the results of the 2020 presidential election. Discrepancies, of course, that only really exist in the minds of Trump loyalists. Walters has pushed for curriculum changes that promote conservative ideologies, criticize wokeness, and reduce focus on topics like Black Lives Matter and the killing of George Floyd. The revised standards, rife with biblical references and nationalism, were approved despite last-minute changes and objections from both Republican leaders and educators. A lawsuit has been filed by parents and teachers in Oklahoma arguing that the process violated review protocols and promotes a biased, politically motivated interpretation of history. We'll follow, but watch for more of this kind of stuff to continue to develop right here at home in Texas. As we've said many times, elections have consequences. DFW and North Texas friends, please mark your calendars for Monday, June 9th. That's when we'll be hosting our 15th anniversary celebration in Dallas. Links to become a supporter and to secure your tickets are up now at progresstexas.org. Shout out to our generous event sponsors, Howard Cleon, Charles Zeller, Pamela Pearson, Alex Andrade, Carol Taylor, Chuck Cruz, Amy Forehand, Eric Johnson and Dr. Mark Parker, John Mazzaro, the Dallas County Democratic Party, Texas Blue Media, and many more. Thanks so much to all of y'all for the support, and we look forward to seeing you again in Dallas on Monday, June 9th for 15 years of Progress. Tickets now at progresstexas.org. Our mission in Progress Texas is to counter the conservative disinformation machine, but they far outmatch us in funding. Oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups spend a lot of money keeping their audiences in the dark. If you've come to appreciate the light that we shine on important political news in Texas on a daily ongoing basis, please know that our regular everyday listeners form a key component of our funding. If that's you, we could use your support as a monthly contributor, and no amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate. Thanks to Norma Jane Lestraco, Maria Jimenez, and Kristen Hartwell, all of whom are on the team. We appreciate all of you very much. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch. For this Monday, May 19th, 2025, links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks for listening. Have a great day and a great week. We'll catch you again tomorrow morning.